Good morning, everyone. Thanks very much for joining me today. I know I'm the first session. So just a little bit about myself. So I've been in games now for about 20 years. I was part of the founding executive team at EDAR, which is a research firm based in Southern California, later acquired by the MPD Group. I was also part of the founding board, as well as a vice president at a company called Tilting Point, a mobile publisher in New York that is doing, they're very successful right now. I'm very happy for them. Yeah, I mean, I've been in this industry for a long time, so I've done a little bit of everything: research, publishing, investments, and development. And I always say I eat, sleep, and breathe this industry, and I truly love working in video games. And I always say, if video games were ever to cease to exist, I would never be able to find a job in any other sector, because I have worked in games my entire life. Now, a little bit more about Interpret and the company I work for. Interpret, we've been in business now for about 13 years. We have offices all around the world, and our primary focus is video game research. And most of the clients, we work with the majority of publishers and developers and entertainment IPs in the gaming industry. And we're about 40 employees right now, but we are growing really fast. So let me talk a little bit about the data you're going to see in this presentation today, and where does the data come from. So every year we do a survey in the US of 1,000 kids and their parents. And we ask them, every conceivable question you can think of when it comes to entertainment and video games. And because we've been doing this now for almost 7 years, it's very interesting. It's very great data, and it's interesting data to look over time, because a lot of the kids, and we've surveyed kids 3 to 12, a lot of the kids that we surveyed 7 years ago are now, either entering high school or in some cases entering college. And it's actually great to see that when we actually look at the high school and college demographic, a lot of what they said and a lot of the habits in their characteristics that they identified when they were a kid are pretty much still true to this day. And that's why we really love doing this type of research, because we do believe it. People say all the time, kids are the future, the kids are the future generation, they're the future leaders of our country. But more importantly, they are the future of shaping how the video game industry not just operates, but the type of content we create and how we deliver it to the user. So just a quick overview on why I really believe, not just believe, I just know. I know the kid market is important. First, they represent 1/4 of the industry's revenue. So they represent about $15 billion in annual revenue towards the video game industry. They will shape the future of our industry. As I mentioned, you'll find that with every generation, you have Generation X and Generation Y, Generation Z, what you do find is that those basic characteristics that we form, either when we're kids or as we're growing into teenagers, don't tend to change over time. They tend to stay with us through adulthood and as we become parents and uncles and aunts and grandparents ourselves. This is a very interesting customer base, and why this is so important is it is a dual customer base, right? You're not just trying to gain the hearts and the minds of children and kids, but you're also but you need to do it with their parents as well. And it's the only segment that has this dual customer base where you need both a kid to say yes and a parent to agree. And it is the fastest growing segment in video games. It's been true. 7 years in a row, kids has always been the segment is growing faster than any other age and demographic in the video game industry. And it's probably still going to be like that for a pretty good time. So what really defines, when we talk about young gamers, we're talking about gamers that are 3 up to 12, what really defines them? First, they do make up the largest part of the population among the different generations. This is a generation that has been wired. Like for most of us here, we kind of grew into it, right? We kind of discovered the internet, and we discovered technology, and we discovered smartphones. This generation is born into it. They don't know otherwise. They don't know what it's like to have a dial-up internet connection. They don't know what it's like to have one of those old Nokia brick cell phones. They are born into what we call the wired generation. And for the very first time, every university out there does their study that tries to create, here are the 10 characteristics or 15 characteristics of each generation. This is the first time where actually gaming is considered one of the major characteristics that is defining this generation. You'll find that they are far more independent and self-directed than what we would think. I think when we were growing up, we were always fearful that our parents would be, I guess, what we would call helicopter parents, always hovering around us, not giving us much freedom. And like most generations, we always say, we're going to do better than how our parents raised us. And because of the way we were raised, we actually are giving our kids a lot more freedom. So they become more independent, more self-directed. Even though that, yes, I still believe that we are becoming helicopter parents, but maybe in a different way. And mostly it's because of technology, right? We can track to see what they're doing, where they're at, what they're purchasing, but we do give them a lot more freedom that allows them to be more independent. The other thing that's interesting about this generation, especially with gaming, is they prefer more cooperative experiences versus competitive experience. They prefer to create. They want to explore. They don't want to be told what to do. They don't want to be on a linear path. And this is something that we didn't have when we grew up, right? When we grew up playing video games, the idea of a cooperative experience didn't exist. If you had a Nintendo or if you had a Super Nintendo, you were lucky to have a second controller. And even if you did, there were very few games that actually had cooperative elements. Nowadays, most games have this, and they're taking advantage of it. Kids love to play with other kids, and parents, adults, and friends online. And I'll kind of refine this in a bit. It's not just they don't like the competitive experience, they do, but they want it to be delivered to them in a cooperative way. The next is FOMO. This is our fault, our generation's fault. The idea of fear of missing out. Because we're constantly connected, there's new trends and fads and crazes that come up, and we're constantly communicating on Facebook or Instagram about whatever new is happening. We've created this I don't know if it's a recognized disease or what have you in the World Health Organization, but it's very true. There's a fear of missing out, and it's something that we unfortunately have passed along to our children. And that's something that we have to recognize, and we'll see that as we go through this presentation and really think about what's going on and how our industry has evolved. This idea of fear of missing out is very true and plays a big role in the characteristics, motivations, and behaviors of kids in games. So now I'll jump into some data. What we found is when we ask kids what are the types of interactions they enjoy in gaming, we find that cooperative modes or cooperative experiences are preferred over singular. So we are going to see things like playing with someone next to me, playing against someone next to me, playing on the same team with someone online. And again, this goes back to the idea of cooperatively competitive. And Fortnite, for those who know Fortnite, hopefully most of you do, that is kind of a cooperative but yet competitive experience where you can play with your friends, but you are doing it in a competitive way against other people. Like I mentioned, they prefer creation over destruction, exploration over linear. Of course, the number one reason, if you ask kids why they play games, they're going to say, well, it's fun. Of course, that's true, and it's been true, and it's always going to be true. But it is interesting to see the next two are being able to create things and being able to explore new worlds. And we'll talk again about Fomo. The word spreads fast among this generation, much faster than for ourselves, which is already too fast. And the example I use is the marshmallow event that occurred in Fortnite. I just want to raise of hands who have actually seen this. Okay, wow. Okay, pretty much everyone. There you go. Actually, keep your hands up. I want to keep your hands up. Keep your hands up. All right. Put your hands down if you did not watch it live. If you did not watch it live, look, everyone's hands went down. Among kids, this was a big deal. I mean, this is where 10 million, and now I think the number is actually bigger than that. We know that 10 million kids watched it, but we also know that a lot of kids kind of had parties at their house where they invited other friends to watch this event. And so let's just assume there's a floor of 10 million people that did it, kids. A top YouTube video of this event, it has only 35 million. And we think, okay, well, that's 3.5x. That seems like a lot. No, in reality, if you look at other live events that have occurred throughout, not just gaming, but just throughout society in itself, you'll typically see that the YouTube version gets around 10x, 100x, even in some cases 1,000x, compared to how many people have actually watched it live. And what this signals to me is that the word spread really fast, and kids wanted to be part of this because they've had a fear of missing out. And lastly, gaming is a part of their life, right? It really is. On average, kids spend about 12 hours a week playing video games across a slew of different devices. And this statistic, because we've been doing it for 7 years, is slowly going up each year. Starting around 8 to 9 hours, if we look back 7 years ago, now we're approaching close to 12 hours a week. So it really is a defining characteristics among this generation. Next, they are big spenders, right? So over the course of the year, the average kid will spend about $1,200 or $600 every 6 months on entertainment. Of that, the biggest category, to no surprise, is video games, right? Kids who have no disposable income, the income comes entirely from their parents or, doing chores around the house, what it may be, but they spend over $400 a year just on video games, and that's a lot of money. When we drill that down, we look at the kind of different segments, right? Because we can't just put all kids into just 3 and 12. No, let's look at different segmentations, cut this by different ways, males and females and different age groups. What we find is that females really are the fastest growing segment. Females ages 3 to 12, the fastest growing segment in video games. And I think that's great, right? And we think back to when we were kids and how we viewed the gaming industry, and we considered it very much male or boy dominated, right? It was about 80-20 when we were growing up. But yet every year that percentage, that gender split, that gender share for females continues to increase. And right now we are seeing almost a near 50-50 split between boys and girls when it comes to games. And a lot of it has to do to the credit to us as an industry for actually recognizing this demand. We are doing a far better job advertising and creating games for female girls that is appropriate. And I would like to think that 10 years from now, and this is very indicative of the future, I'd like to think 10 years from now, and hopefully less, when we look at the gaming industry, we can say that it's in perfect parity with gender in terms of being 50-50. Right now, it's kind of is if you include mobile and the casual games, but if we talk more about some more mid-core or hardcore games, which do very much skew 80% male, I'd like to think that's going to get closer to maybe 60-40 and hopefully 50-50 over the next 10 to 15 years, and it's trending that way. Again, just females who are ages 3 to 12 that are just getting into games and growing this industry, they're not going to stop playing games just because they get older. And it's not just games itself where they're spending a lot of money. They're also spending a lot of money on merchandise. So 53% of kids have indicated they've bought video game-related merchandise over the past 6 months. And if we extrapolate this to a year, they spend about $80 a year on gaming-related merchandise. So that is another opportunity. This actually just helps reinforce that, yes, gaming is part of their life. It's not just something they do when they get home or something they do on the playground, but they're actually buying merchandise, right? They're buying shoes, they're buying shirts and hoodies and action figures. So it goes just beyond games. But if we do look at the split, if we take it from, split it into 3 ways, we do find that as kids get older, they tend to spend less on gaming merchandise. And I don't know if that's just the natural kind of natural course of when kids get older, they just don't want to be wearing Minecraft t-shirts. But it also could be an indication that maybe within this market, as they get to 10, 11, 12, and into their early tweens, I believe they still do want to purchase gaming merchandise, but maybe there's just not something out there that's right for them. Maybe they don't want to wear, a Roblox hoodie or, Minecraft sneakers. Maybe it might be something like an iPad cover or an iPhone cover that is of their favorite game or character. So we think there's opportunity there. I don't think this is a situation where the kids are just aging out of wanting gaming merchandise. So next we'll talk about this dual customer base, which is very interesting. So when we surveyed parents and kids, we found that 91% of kids have to ask permission before spending money in a mobile game. And I think that's great. That is a fantastic statistic, especially given kind of the, what we see in the news, right? We always see in the news every couple of months, some kid gets a hold of some parent's credit card and racks up a couple $1,000s in in-app purchases on, through iTunes or Google Play or what have you. The reality is one that's very, very few and far between and not a representation of what reality is. But second, us as parents, we've seen that. So we've become more protective. And so I think it's actually great to see that, yes, 91% of parents out there make sure that their kids ask for permission. How much are you spending and what are you spending it on? And I know we would want it to get to 100%. Of course we would, but that's obviously not reality, and it's impossible to get anything to 100%. But what I will say is we did dig into this, and we interview parents every time we do this this yearly survey. We go out and we actually do interview parents just so we can get a qualitative aspect to it. And what we found is of those where their kids do not have to ask permission, they do something different. So the 91% is actually much closer to 100 than we think. Some parents give their kids an allowance. They'll give them an iTunes or Google Play gift card, and they say, you can do whatever you want with it. Spend it however you will. And they treat it as an exercise to build trust and to build responsibility. So if we actually include them into this, we're getting closer to 94, 95, or even 96%. The other thing that I find really interesting is that 78% of kids want to play games with their parents. Now, for us growing up, we didn't have that. We didn't want to play games with our parents. I did, personally, but my parents didn't want to. They couldn't understand it. My dad would say, there's too many buttons. I don't know what, like, Dad, too many buttons. There's two, it's A and B. It's too much for me, I'm out, right? This generation, and it's because of us, this stat gets credit to us as parents because we do want to play games with our kids, right? Because we are connected and we are gamers in some fashion. So we do want to participate in something that our kids consider a hobby. And our kids actually do appreciate that. They want that. We're also used as a significant source for discovering new games. Because they know we play games ourselves. Again, whether it's in a casual manner or we're playing more hardcore games like shooters and RPGs, they recognize that and they do come to us and ask us, what is the newest game that's out? So next, let's look at why they play, and I think this is interesting. First, on the left, where it says 39% prefer to play by myself, and then 61% want to play against other people. That's great. That reinforces some of the data that we've seen prior. The kids do want to play with other people. And keep in mind, because they want that, that's why we are seeing kind of a revolution in the industry with games like Minecraft and Roblox and Fortnite and PUBG and so many more, where it is about that cooperative experience. The other thing I thought was very interesting is that 54% say they want a game where they can get in and get out quickly, and only 46% say they want to play a game that they can put a lot of time into. When we survey adults, we see something completely different. With adults, they want games that they can jump in and jump out quickly in, right? And they don't really want games that they have to dedicate a lot of time to. So I think it's very interesting to see kind of the converse to what we're seeing with this stat when we look at adults compared to children. Children really do want to get into games that they can play more, they can spend more time in. And we're starting to see that a lot more, again, with Minecraft, right, where you can create anything. Even Fortnite is heading into that direction where there is a lot more creation and exploration. Next, we'll talk about sources, how they find out about games, which I find very interesting. Okay, no surprise, right? Friends, family at the top. That's true for the kid generation, Generation Z, as well as Generation Y. What I found to be really interesting is first YouTube. They consider YouTube, Twitch as one of the top sources of how they discover new games. Now, it wasn't too long ago. I've been in games now for 20 years, and it wasn't long ago, I think it would say 6 or 7 years ago, we did a bunch of studies on the console market and asked, how do you discover the next Call of Duty or Grand Theft Auto or Assassin's Creed? And we found that 45% of adults, right, and this was, again, 5, 6, 7 years ago, said ads on or commercials on television. For this generation, it's only 19% in terms of a source that is used. So again, we kind of see what's a little bit of the differences between us and this young generation. Next, we'll talk about how entertainment is consumed. I find this very interesting. And I use Fortnite, the Fortnite marshmallow example, I use it all the time because it has so many different implications and there's so many things we can take away from it. And I formalize a very strong conclusion that it deals a little bit about games, but it really encapsulates what this generation is about and where we're taking it. So we know that over 10 million kids watch this, right? For most, this was their first concert experience, right? Even though it took place digitally, this was if you ask, what was your first concert? Oh, Marshmello. I was like, really? You let your parents let you go to a Marshmello concert? Oh yeah, it happened on Fortnite. I brought my friends over. We had some fun. And it's like, okay, now think about that. Don't get too far ahead of me on this. Most parents wouldn't let their kids attend one in real life. There's a lot of reasons. Maybe it's not appropriate. One, you got to park, you got to drive, you got to park. Buying Coke is like, and Diet Coke is like $10 a bottle, and merchandise is $100. No, most parents would not let their kids attend one of these, on top of being in a crowd of over 50,000 people. But let me phrase it like this: what if their favorite artist put on a full digital concert, right? Let's say it's a Marshmello, it's a Drake, whoever it may be, whoever the kids like these days, and they were charging $10. And maybe it is within Fortnite or Minecraft or some type of other open world game, and they were charging $10. What do you think parents would prefer? Would they say, yeah, you know what? $10 seems about right. And the reason why is because, again, what I mentioned, like no one's going to let their kids go to concerts. And parents, of course, have to chaperone that. They have to go with them. Again, they have to park. They have to buy expensive things. A lot of inconveniences for parents. And $10 sounds like a pretty good bargain, especially since most kids will pay the $10 and then invite three or four of their friends over, and they'll all chip in a couple of dollars. And then if you put it into that perspective and really think about it, I believe the way, and concerts is just one example, right? I think 5 years from now, and it's probably becoming much closer, is the concerts are going to go all digital. They might take place in one location, in maybe Madison Square Gardens, and they'll charge $1,000 to $2,000 for a ticket, but they're also going to be able to charge people to watch it digitally. And so if we think about that and go even further, and we talk about 10 years from now, why even have concerts live in a place in the first place, right? And so if you bring that all together, it really, really helps, I believe, encapsulate why this generation really is going to change the way, not just how we consume entertainment, but the types of games that we play as well. So with that, I think that's enough time. I believe I have 5 minutes for Q&A.
Hi, so super interesting. It makes me wonder about all the successful games, whether all of them have a core inside or most of them have a core of young kids playing and raising them to popularity, right? It makes me think, what kind of patterns have you seen in kind of like thematics, let's say? Like I work on a game that has a bit of violence, for instance. Are young kids allowed to play games with violence? At the end of the day, they play Fortnite. How about other things? Like, I'm wondering how many of the very popular games that many of them have violence inside, kids are allowed to play,
Yeah, I mean, now you're asking for kind of parental guidance, and I'm not a parent myself, so that would be difficult to do. But obviously, universally, yeah, I mean, we don't want kids playing games that are violent, of course. And then, yeah, you bring up Fortnite, but kids do play Fortnite. Is Fortnite violent? I mean, yeah, I guess in some cases it could be, because you are shooting weapons and you're kind of evaporating other players. And what I always do say is that you can't, no matter how hard you try, and every year the laws get stricter and stricter, because we do need to protect kids from violent video games and violent interactions, but the reality is they still are going to play the games, and it ultimately does come down to the parent. You can put whatever age gating process you want into your game if a parent is going to allow it. And we've already seen parents are aware of what games kids are playing, so if parents are okay with it, then yeah. What I will say is that from a game development perspective, understand that yes, kids, you're not marketing to them, you're not advertising to them, and you probably don't even recognize them as a customer when you do your research. But you do still have to understand that, yeah, there is some type of social liability there, that if you do make a popular game, kids are going to play. I think there are certain extremes, like if you take something like like a Grand Theft Auto, right? I think everyone agrees, no, kids definitely should not play that, but to what extent is the law required to ensure that, and to what extent are publishers and developers required to make sure that kids aren't going to play it? Are we going to go to the extreme, which I think China is going that direction, where you have to get kind of like a gamer card? You have to be verified, one, to measure how much people are playing, and then of course ensuring that the kids that are not age appropriate cannot play it as well. Should we move closer to that as a society? And that's a very political question that I kind of just asked myself, but I'm not going to answer. Thank you.
So my question is, related to what you were saying about kids as a consumer, and how it relates to the effectiveness of the purchase intent for the game that they're playing. Does any of your insight show purchase intent, purchase power for these kids as either as the spender of their allowances or as influencers to their parents for products that are advertised to them in the game, but not necessarily like related to the game?
Okay, so the back half of that question was intriguing. So you're talking about the advertisements in the games.
Correct. So
Okay.
let's say they're playing an ad-supported game.
Yeah, I know where you're going, but finish that though, please.
Yeah. So let's say off the top of my head, a Lego ad.
Yep, that's fine.
Are you saying that the influence that kids are having as consumers or customers is related to the game itself? In essence, the game is kind of the ad, the game itself, because they're associating whatever experience with the game.
Yeah.
And then they want to get the shoes that have the game or the character or the hoodie or what you say. Are you saying because they're so engaged in the game that even an ad that's like something they might like a toy or a different game, is that also effective, or it's more effective, it's just related to the game?
Yeah, it's so I think we're talking more about if we're talking about kind of native advertisement where advertisers work with the publisher to actually do some type of event or have some type of special in-game item that they can purchase. Oh yes, parents, and we do ask that question in our survey. Parents are very much okay with that. And dang well knowing that the publishers themselves have done great vetting to ensure that whatever advertisements they can control that they're showing in the game, they're going to be age appropriate. But then if we talk about forced advertisements like ad-driven mobile games, actually we find that parents have increasingly been more open to that. So we do ask them what they feel about their kids seeing ads in games. And I'll have to get you the stat, but it's somewhere between 50 to 60% of parents actually strongly approve of their kids seeing ads instead of making an in-app purchase. They would much prefer their kids see an ad than actually spending real money. And I think that's just a factor of parents understanding that yeah, the developer, someone has to make money. So whoever's making these things have to make money, and I don't feel comfortable spending $1, but it's okay if you take 15 seconds of my kid's time to show an ad. And ad networks on the back end are very effective to ensure they're not showing mature content. Right. I can't say it's always 100%, but one thing that is very interesting that came out of it, the type of ad that parents disapprove of the most, and it is the type of ad that is actually the most profitable and becoming the most prevalent is actually interactive ads. So if you're playing a mobile game, whatever, you finish something, it shows an ad. The ad is interactive. You're actually playing the game. Either it's a Candy Crush, you're doing a match 3, or it's a fighting game. You're actually playing the game, but it's an ad. Parents disapprove of that a lot because they view it as an intrusion. Right? Parents have already given the publisher of the game, permission to have access to their kids. Right. When they asked to download it, but they did not give you permission to interact with their kids with games that are not approved of. So this is where an instance where technology is moving a little bit faster than parents can keep up. And that's just something we do have to keep in mind, even though I've never come across an interactive ad that's been inappropriate, but it's just the idea of, hey, is it okay if your kids play a game that we're not going to tell you what it is, and the game can't tell you what it is until you load it up, and we can't tell you. Is it okay? Of course it's not going to be okay.
You mentioned that the average time kids play is around 12 hours per week. Was there a big difference between the 10 to 12 group and the 3 to 5 group? Because that amounts to like 2 hours a day, a bit less than 2 hours a day.
No, there wasn't a big difference between. The only difference that existed was the type of devices. As they get older, we tend to see them play more on the PC and console. And then as a kid, when you're younger, you're generally on the iPad. There are some things to keep in mind, like what is a game? Because this is something we both ask the kids and parents. And when we do these surveys, we're very smart about it. Like we know we can't just directly ask a 3-year-old how many hours you play. They don't have any concept of time. So we do depend a lot on the parents to answer some of these questions, but we don't find a difference. But you do bring up a good point. When there is a 3, 4, or 5-year-old, what is considered a game to the parent may not be considered a game to a kid. Something that's Well, I guess as long as the kid's being entertained, let's just call it a game. But a lot of the stuff that is a game to them is educational stuff, spelling, mathematics. But no, we actually don't see that. We don't see a big difference, and yeah, that's something I think it's worth looking at. It maybe has to do. I wonder if there's a correlation with battery life of an iPad. Like if you play an iPad, just straight at 100%, maybe you're getting only 3 hours of life out of it, or maybe 2 hours. So. Now I'm just adding more work and research onto myself right there. But anyways, we do have to go. We have our next presenter here. I appreciate everyone taking the time. Thank you again very much. Feel free to see me afterwards. Send me an email. The presentation's free for anyone that wants it. Thank you.